Imagine you're walking down a long dirt road. It's the same path your parents have travelled and they love telling you about how much easier the journey is today, and that all you need to do is keep walking. The milestones stretch out in front of you, landmarks that your parents reached as part of their journey, but as the years go by and the road stretches out, they just seem further and further away. So, there's a very good reason Gen Z is the most apathetic, cynical and detached generation in living history. Just look at the hand they've been dealt. It's so much harder today to find a meaningful relationship, buy a home, start a family, get a good job, and generally live your life. With each
even when the whole Andrew Tate stuff was going on, me being Gen Z, I was like very much into that at a point. And I was like, that didn't fulfill me, doing all this kind of like hedonistic and like very vapid and like surface level stuff. Like I tried going down the self-help guru right visualization. I always wanted to kind of figure what was my purpose in life, but nothing seems to quite do it for me until I put my faith in. Right guys, your fellow Gen Z Brit very curious mind is today going to be checking out why is Gen Z slowly giving up. Now you see me being a Gen Zer, when I saw this title, I'm thinking, what are we giving up? Why are we giving up? You know, I'm curious. I'm intrigued to see what people have to say. Obviously, if you've been keeping up with my channel, you know that I've been doing a lot of these kind of generational videos and kind of going over some of the characteristics and the stereotypes and whatnot. And I definitely feel like there's a rhetoric around Gen Z as being kind of lazier, a lot more emotional and, you know, babied and stuff like that. So it'll be very interesting to kind of just see this perspective, and I just want to kind of just see what Moon has to say on this. I've did some movie reactions on my Patreon. I recently did the Breakfast Club reaction and Prince's Purple Rain movie, as well as some of his albums that I reviewed on that day as well. And I plan on doing a lot more movies and album reviews from some of the classics from the back in the good old days. So if any of you guys are interested in that, then definitely consider checking that out, guys. But look, with that being said, let's get straight into this video. Let's go.
Imagine you're walking down a long dirt road. It's the same path your parents have travelled and they love telling you about how much easier the journey is today, and that all you need to do is keep walking. The milestones stretch out in front of you, landmarks that your parents reached as part of their journey, but as the years go by and the road stretches out, they just seem further and further away. Sometimes a storm blows in and you have to wait for it to pass, or the road turns to mud and it feels like you're trudging through a swamp. Eventually you look up and you realise that you've gotten no further than you were a day, a month, or a year ago. There's a very good reason Gen Z is the most apathetic, cynical and detached generation in living history. Just look at the hand they've been dealt. It's so much harder today to find a meaningful relationship, buy a home, start a family, get a good job, and generally live your life. With each
he just started off with a lot of things. Get a house, start a family, get in a relationship. Let me hear that again, man.
Generation in living history. Just look at the hand they've been dealt. It's so much harder today to find a meaningful relationship, buy a home, start a family, get a good job, and generally live your life. With each
You know what? Okay, from my perspective and doing these kinds of videos from back in the day, from what I am aware, I feel like it's harder to get a home now. And maybe there's a little bit of like a pressure, because I feel like, you know, maybe a lot of you Gen Xers that watch me on the channel or boomers could probably relate to being able to buy a home at a young age or living out and stuff like that. I don't know if it's necessarily easier, but it seems that way. And with the cost of living now and stuff like that, buying a home seems really unrealistic at like in the 20s and stuff like that. And on top of that, like you know, getting into a relationship, like having a meaningful one, with everyone being so kind of superficial and the attention spans going out the window, and people don't really look for meaningful like interactions anymore because everything is just kind of so oversaturated and just in your face, and you kind of get used to it so quickly. And like there's so many, so technology has kind of really changed things. But yeah, so far I'm hearing what they're saying. I'm starting a family as well. I hear what they're saying, man.
Rung on the ladder getting further apart, you can't blame people for doubting if the climb is worth it. Participation in society used to be based on an underlying deal. If you paid attention at school, worked hard, and treated people with respect, eventually everything would fall into place. Society had set structures which guaranteed that the people who followed the rules would actually get something out of it. A home, a family, a purpose, something which maybe added meaning to their lives.
This is
But over the
interesting.
past few decades, all of that was systematically stripped away. It was the lie we were told growing up. Everyone has to grow up. But the breaking of that illusion has been particularly traumatic to Gen Z. As children, we were told we could do anything, and that the world was a place where all of this would come true. But the reality that we actually grew into was far from a paradise, and the way we learnt about it was like diving straight into the deep end. Just a few hundred years ago, the things people learnt and knew about the world fit neatly together. People learnt about the world from the people around them, and they built their own beliefs based entirely on their own small world. Structure and traditions were handed down to you and your community. And then it all got thrown into chaos. The Enlightenment and the scientific revolution destroyed the foundations of these religious and traditional worldviews. People's worldviews expanded, and their lives got more complicated. As religion lost its dominant role, ideology came in to replace it. As the world slowly modernized, traditional communities struggled to survive, and traditional structures in society were replaced by ideological ones. People's allegiance and place shifted from their community to their nation state and the ideas they stood for. Even into the 20th century though, your view of the world could still remain consistent. Most people still had a clear path for their lives, and a clear way of thinking about life shared among the people they knew. The internet and access to mass media from across the world has blown all of this away. Instead of one belief system dominating our lives, there's thousands of false desires for us to pick and choose from. Instead of consistent shared experience, we've been exposed to millions of different people's subjective views on life. By the time they're 12 years old, kids today have been plunged headfirst into the shifting sea of ideas. Millions of judgments and opinions about what's right or wrong, how you should act, and what's either desirable or disgusting. It's easy for people to retreat into this world of information. The philosopher and sociologist Jean Baudrillard describes this world as hyperreality, a sort of world beyond worlds made up of meanings behind objects and people rather than what they actually are. Things and concepts which exist in the real world like beauty, tragedy, virtue and vice all get warped and maximized. Beautiful people become impossibly perfect with computer editing and filters. Every crisis from around the world is suddenly right in front of you until it's quickly replaced by something else. The craziest outbursts and the most violent altercations rise to the top. These forces are most noticeable in people's sexual identity and preferences. Overstimulation and seeing all of your desires digitalized eventually gets boring for people. The more immersed in hyperreality they become, the harder it is for them to quench these desires. Everything becomes more and more extreme and detached from actual reality. Baudrillard describes this
Oh, that is so deep. Oh, that is so deep. When he's saying it and he's detailing it just the way it is, I can see what he's saying. You know, there is definitely that hyper perspective that people have that's exaggerated because of what you see on social media, which isn't necessarily reality. And even me doing content creation, like I'm aware that the things that you guys see are the things that are like accustomed to what you guys watch. That's how a lot of algorithms are. And then it's to say, if you see a certain type of thing, you're gonna just see it more and more and more, and it's gonna constantly reinforce that view or perspective that you're probably already watching because it's predicated off of something you're interested in, whether that's healthy interest or like a traumatic kind of interest or whatever it is, and then it's like a reinforcing feedback loop that can easily spin out of control and result in a lot of people thinking the world is a certain type of way that it isn't.
Real world we live in. People find themselves fleeing the desert of the real for this digital world of symbols and subjectivity. But even if you don't get so caught up in hyperreality, it still changes the world around you. People's values and beliefs shift to reflect their ever-changing window into public opinion. Objects and people gain value according to how they're regarded in this hyperreality, as opposed to their actual value. They become symbols. Eventually, as we're seeing today, the hyperreal world begins to replace the real one entirely. If people act based on hyperreality and social status within it, then it starts to dominate life itself.
See, that is just the deep thing, isn't it? Because it doesn't matter if it is reality. If people think it's reality, it kind of becomes reality. Isn't that an interesting one, man?
Act based on hyperreality and social status within it, then it starts to dominate life itself. Parts of life like fashion, which were already based on symbolism and underlying meanings, show the most severe effects of this. It's only in a hyperreal world that the brand Supreme could make a literal brick with their logo carved into it, which would then later sell online for over $1,000. Living in this world, and especially growing up in it, makes it much harder for people to find actual meaning. When everything only has value based on shifting opinions and an invisible social hierarchy, lucky, nothing has any permanent meaning behind it. This hyperreality becomes all the more tempting when you put down the phone and take a real look at today's world. Following the advice of the people who came before us doesn't work too well. The world has changed so much in recent history that the roadmap they followed just doesn't work anymore. Finding someone special, settling down, buying a home and having children just isn't feasible for most people. And the root of the problem is economic. When you look at what it takes to reach these integral parts of life today compared to 20 or 50 years ago, it puts it all into perspective. Let's start with the US. Here's the home price to median household income ratio over time. It measures how many years it would take, saving all the money the average American household earns, to buy a family home. From 1965 to 2000, it hovered.
This is a graph and a half. That rhymes. I need to see this, yeah, because from my perspective, I definitely think it's harder to own a house nowadays. But I want to actually see what this says.
The average American household earns to buy a family home. From 1965 to 2000, it hovered around 3.5 to 4.5, a healthy ratio that meant that homes were usually within the reach for most people, which isn't the case today at all. After years of stagnating wages, greedy bankers playing the system, and a global pandemic, we're closing in on 8. It would take 8 years of wages to buy just one home. The UK is even worse off on average.
Double.
They blew past 8 years in 2015. Now it would take 9 years of wages to buy one house. In the big cities, it's even worse. To buy the average home in LA and comfortably pay the mortgage, you need to make over $220,000. In New York, the median house price is equivalent to over 10 years of income for the average household. A London family would need a staggering 16 years of uninterrupted wages to buy a house outright. The cities that young people move to.
If that doesn't put things into perspective, man, I don't know what does. I can see how this picture is being built. If you look at the cards that us Gen Zers are, what my generation has dealt with, is dealing with now currently, it's a lot more, it's a lot different. And I think we're also seeing maybe a little bit of that impact in the workforce, because a lot of Gen Zers now are getting into the workforce as of right now. Me being one of them, but I'm also going down this entrepreneurial kind of like content creation route, which is what you're seeing now. But I know a lot of my friends are trying to get jobs right now. A lot of us are finishing college. So, I'm also interested to kind of see how Gen Zers are going to be like in the workforce and how that kind of impacts things. So I feel like we have such a different mindset. And growing up in technology now, and you see kind of what life is like on the internet, I think a lot of people are going to be more dissatisfied with kind of what a typical 9 to 5 will give them, because you go on the internet and you can just see like someone living their best life and you're kind of just thinking, why is my life not like that? There's more of that aspect compared to previous generations. But this is just interesting stuff, man. Look, I'm very curious. If you guys been to this point, I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say of it so far. And do you agree with the things that have been said? Let me know in the comments right now before we continue in. But once you've done that, let's continue, man.
16 years of uninterrupted wages to buy a house outright. The cities that young people move to for work, and high wages end up being far harder to get a foothold in. And all of this is so important because owning a home is the foundation for a traditional life. Living paycheck to paycheck and paying off someone else's mortgage means there's barely a safety net at all. It's dangerous for people to live their lives because it's just too expensive in our society. Adding in childcare costs makes it clear why very few people are even having children anymore. Is it really a surprise the West is facing a giant population collapse? Of course, it isn't just housing here. Inflation has meant that everything's gotten so much more expensive. Corporate profiteering and price gouging haven't helped either. But as everything has gotten more expensive, wages have continued to
let me just see that.
And price gouging haven't helped either. But as
look at this stuff, man. Let's see. I've been doing maths in college, man. These graphs, I live for these graphs, man. Look at this. What the average prices for select foods in the 2021 and 2022? Like, yeah, look at that, man. This one's almost doubled. This one, yeah, why? Like, look at that, man. Eggs, average price, guys. Average. So I'm not even talking like what you say on a data. Like, this is crazy different. Butter, tomato, like even I know from in the UK. If my UK is watching this, you guys will know. Meal deals back in the day, for the longest time they were £3. Yeah, in Tesco. Now they're like £3.40. And I feel like that is still going to go up. And that's if you got a club card. If you don't have a club card, it's like £3.60 or 75 or something like that. And just meal deals are just changed. Like, everything's changed. Look, I'm seeing the inflation. I'm like, wow, sweets used to be like in the 20p, you know what I'm saying, area. And then now they're like £1. And I know a lot of you guys watching in the US could probably relate to that in however it relates to some of the things you guys are used to. Especially you Gen Xers. You can definitely see how much inflation has changed the prices of things now, but crazy, man.
It's gotten so much more expensive. Corporate profiteering and price gouging haven't helped either, but as everything has gotten more expensive, wages have continued to stagnate for most. Since 1979, the bottom 90% of the US saw their income rise by around 24% adjusting for inflation. Meanwhile, it doubled for the top 1% of the country. Hyperreality has distracted people from this. They still know it's happening, everyone's feeling the effects. But with the constant assault of useless information you're powerless to do anything about, it just gets swallowed up by the constant cycle. It acts as a release valve for people's rightful outrage. Real anger and emotions that would have been converted into real action end up in cyberspace instead. There they join the billions of other opinions and fade away into the background noise. Things go by so fast we're unable to process them. Humans are just not built to deal with so much at once. And as a result, hyperreality all seems like a blur.
Yo, can we just take a second, man? This script, like this Moon guy is really telling a story, man. Look, link to the video in the original video will be in the description below. Cause this video is I'm hooked. I'm hooked.
To deal with so much at once, and as a result, hyperreality all seems like a blur. Like you're traveling through it all so fast that you only get a sense of the underlying emotions. The algorithms manipulate this further and push content that makes people feel self-conscious or negative to the top. It doesn't help that we're going through a global crisis right now, the brink of a third world war, economic catastrophe. The world's a mess, and Gen Z knows they're the ones who are going to have to clean it all up. And so applying Baudrillard's work to our world today illuminates the reasons behind how absurd and unreal it can all seem. The replacement of reality with hyperreality shifted the focus of everything to social status. Money is a good example. Generally, people's wages and the amount of money they earned was linked to the quality of their labor and how productive they were. Today, how much you earn is entirely based on your social status within the system. It's been to the benefit of both CEOs and the top OnlyFans models. They both earn their money not through the quality of their work or what they produce, but through their position at the top of the hierarchy. The focus on speculative value, as opposed to real value, has aided scam artists and snake oil salesmen as well. It's only in our modern world that Sam Bankman-Fried could convince top hedge funds and millions of people to invest in a Ponzi scheme. The result of all of this is a society which puts far more focus on the optics of equality whilst becoming even more rigidly ordered and stratified.
Yo, this is deep. This is deep. And I hear it so much, man. It's not even about reality anymore, innit? It's just like, it's more so perceived reality, and especially the things that go to the top on the internet kind of dictate a lot of the value, or the perceived value. Like things aren't really based on quality like that anymore. It's kind of like who can be the loudest and most polarizing and driven by trauma or hate, like, because hate is what goes further these days. Like, there's just this is mad.
Movement up the ladder becomes even harder despite the appearance of a constant march towards a more liberal society. So how do you survive in a world like this? Well, there's a few different routes people take. Lots of people detach entirely, completely leaving the desert of the real and retreating entirely into hyperreality. It isn't an active choice, of course. The passive nature of consumption just goes hand in hand with the inaction of depression. Simple things like exercise and living life become harder and harder to do. As you sink into these lower levels, the nasty loop is that doing these things is what you need in the first place to break you out, but the more depressed someone is, the more difficult they become. There isn't one single cure to this, or some collection of words that will solve it. Everyone's journey is their own, and what people do have is their own personal strength and the people around them. Finding a natural reason to break free and carry on is completely different though. It's something philosophers have tried to solve for thousands of years, with middling results. Today, there's a few general approaches people try to use to find some sort of meaning. One approach has been championed by people like Andrew Tate to embrace hyperreality to the fullest. If social status is all that matters, then why not give in and make it the meaning behind your life as well? Andrew Tate calls this breaking out of the Matrix. But really, it's more similar to what Cypher did in the film than Neo. When he portrayed Neo and decided to go back into the Matrix, he represented embracing hyperreality. He accepted that even if the steak he was eating and the life he was living was fake and meaningless, he might as well enjoy the pleasures of it. Building social status, buying Bugattis, living in Dubai, having empty encounters with multiple women might sound like a 15-year-old boy's dream life, but in reality, that life never existed in the first place.
Andrew Tate has a lot of Gen Zers in a chokehold, man. Like, That's actually when you mad. That's a whole situation in itself.
Might sound like a 15-year-old boy's dream life, but in reality, that life never existed in the first place. It's an idealized image with little basis in true reality, expressed through heavily edited snippets and highlights. And even if you could live a life like that, it wouldn't add any real meaning to your life. You have no soul, you have no consciousness, you're not connected to any deeper purpose within inside of you. There will always be a faster and more expensive car to buy or a larger mansion to own. Treating everything and everyone like an object of social status also justifies awful and abusive behavior. Any belief system that reduces people into something else inevitably leads to tragedy. Whilst embracing hyperreality isn't the answer, rejecting it completely isn't either. It would sound ideal to just take your loved ones and go live in a cabin somewhere. You'd be free to live an authentic life in nature, but it just isn't very realistic. Most people can't afford to just leave society, and even if they can, it's hard to convince others to join you. And by cutting out a community, you're cutting out one of the most important needs in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Deleting social media might be a less drastic solution, but you'll still be living in a hyper-real society. Detaching from life and society in these ways might be the right option for some. For others, it's life-denying. It's a decision born out of the fear of suffering what society has become. Would it not be better to work within society and at least try and make it a bit better, rather than just leaving it to the rest of the world? When the world faced a similar crisis of meaning 150 years ago, Nietzsche saw that the only escape from nihilism was to create your own values. They can't be based in hyperreality, and as curated collection of other people's experiences. The only thing that actually exists is your own viewpoint and your own perspective. That world is the only one you have even limited control over. Nietzsche believed that the highest values we can create come from the innate human will to power. And what he meant by this is still up for debate, but it doesn't mean simply forcing everything and everyone into submission. Instead, one interpretation of this will to power is how well you can shape the world around you. To have power in your life, the better you can make it, and the more it suits your own personal purposes, the more power you have. So analyze everything you read, hear, or see that could impact your decisions. Think about the motivations behind the person saying it. Decide whether it aligns with your own personal world and whether it can make it better. If it can, embrace it and see what happens. If not, discard it. The world is going through a crisis and it'll need strong principle.
Yeah, but I don't really agree with that, because even to some capacity, like, can you even trust how you view things? Because especially like people aren't aware as much of how much they're influenced by the things around them. So true say, a lot of what you think could be shit, like good for you, is that something that is actually good for you versus what you think is good for you because of what you've seen and stuff like that. Things that you subconsciously like, what's the word? Things that you like subconsciously internalize.
Happens. If not, discard it. The world is going through a crisis and it'll need strong, principled people to see it through. The only thing you can do though is worry about your own world and the people around you. The rest is up to fate. It's times of crises that breed strong people. Make sure you're one of them. But if you're interested in really finally defeating your social media addiction once and for all, I think you'll find my community of interest.
Okay, I think this is pretty much the end of the video, but look, you see, my simple answer to all of this is put your faith in Christ. Simple as that, man. Give your life to Christ. And I know that sounds that might even sound triggering to some people, but from my experience, and I can only speak on my experience, right? Say, take it or leave it. But to say, I've tried to put my faith and hope in, even when the whole Andrew Tate stuff was going on, maybe in Jezza, I was like very much into that at a point. And I was like, that didn't fulfill me, doing all this kind of like hedonistic and like very vapid and like surface level stuff, like didn't really find fulfillment in that. I tried going down the self-help guru right visualization, but nothing seemed to quite do it for me until I put my faith in something that has not changed, something that is trustworthy, something that is true. Because something that I learned from doing maths a lot, you know, it's a very like black and white subject, and it taught me that there's only one truth. And I used to find, like, when I was going down this kind of filtering system where I had to like figure out, because I always wanted to kind of figure what was my purpose in life. And I kept seeking, I wanted to understand, like, what is this truth that I'm looking for? There's a truth to life, there's a truth to how things work, there's a purpose and meaning behind things. There's something that will help you conceptualize and help you navigate through the struggles of life and see it in the way that it actually is. And when I kept searching for it, I found that exactly in Christ. That even though the world's probably going to get a lot more deeper down this rabbit hole, again, like I said, the only way you can really navigate through it is if you put your trust in something that is true, and you can test it. You can test it out on a bunch of different things. You can do your own worldview stuff. You can do believing in whatever you want to believe. But I think at the very end of the day, there's gonna be holes and discrepancies and reality, like things that are incongruent with your worldview and reality that you're gonna come across when you put your faith in something that isn't true, or isn't completely true. But when you do find the truth, there's not going to be those discrepancies, because you're always going to understand that this is why things are, and it's going to help you navigate through those things. Look, I'm preaching at this point, but look, guys, let me know what you thought of this video. Let me know what you thought of things I have to say and what the guy had to say. Do you agree with the documentary? Do you disagree? Do you disagree with what I had to say and all these things? Comment on a blue heart if it's disappointing video. I just love knowing who my real ones that he made disappoint, who didn't just click on the video as soon as it ended. And of course, guys, look, like the video before you head on out. And yeah, guys, look, I've been your boy JayFlex. This has been me checking out Moon. Why Gen Z growing, slowly giving up. And for those guys who made this point, it has been absolutely wonderful. And I'll see you guys again in the next one. Peace.